and I cover commercial real estate primarily, and it's no secret. We've written about it plenty of times in different ways, and it comes up consistently. The development community, the business community, they talk about Long Island being an expensive place to develop. And in Nassau County specifically, although it's not quite related, but in the realm of development, as was mentioned earlier this week, those 72 acres surrounding the Coliseum is essentially one of the few large tracts of developable land. There's very little in the way of open vacant lots. That's just across the board, especially true in Nassau.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think Nassau might be at the point where they're starting to protect what's left. To me, we look at all of the, I don't think you can call it, or maybe it is gentrification, I don't know. But the upgrading, towns of Farmingdale, Great Neck did the same thing. But, we're talking about restaurants and bars. They're the only ones that can afford the rent. It's tough to find a clothing store in a small town. It's all, that seems to be, and they call it a success. I don't know how long, that kind of business model continues, but to have 15 bars in a 2-block stretch and then 12 restaurants, I don't know. It doesn't seem. I would think mixing it up would be the smart thing, but apparently, they can't.
Well, I mean, and I think if we're talking in general about the kinds of developments that are happening. Sorry,
you okay?
I lost you there for a second.
Yeah, okay.
If we're talking about the kind of development that is envisioned, say specifically for the property surrounding the Coliseum.
The Coliseum, right.
The idea behind that is a mixed-use development. In broad strokes, that's essentially the mix of residential, the mix of retail, the mix of office, and the idea sort of being this live, work, play. That's been a lot of the, not just at the Coliseum, but in general, a lot of kind of the developments we have been seeing that have been proposed for all parts and corners of Long Island.
Yeah. Well, mixed use. That sounds nice, but I want to know what the mix is. Just the same as when I hear affordable housing, I want to know what the rent is. I guess I'm cynical enough to realize that those words don't cut it for me, because the rents in the apartments in Farmingdale, everybody said, they're affordable housing. Well, $2,500 a month for me is not affordable housing. Apparently to some people it is, and I guess they wrote the story, or they coined the term. So I don't know.
When are we going to? There are a lot of discussions about this.
Yeah, right. When do you think we'll actually find out what the? When is this going to boil down and come up with an answer, or?
In terms of,
I don't know. I guess are they still negotiating with the town?
Oh, in regards to
the Coliseum.
Yeah, no. Yeah. So, in essence, what happened, the application had been submitted earlier this year. The IBA has a new process by which they have a preliminary presentation now in which, say, a company or a developer comes before the IBA and explains essentially what they're trying to do. They submit then a preliminary application, and they have discussions, and the IDA board asks them, very specific questions about the project, its impact, cost, and source of labor, things like that.
Right.
And then from there, there's a bunch of things happen, including an environmental impact study to make sure nothing would potentially be a negative impact to the area. Development is being proposed. They do an economic study to see what that impact would likely be for the area. They have a public hearing in which they, basically set aside time for any public comment if residents would like to ask any questions or present any objections. And then they have a final resolution meeting. And so in the case of this particular project, they had the preliminary presentation earlier this year, back in June, I believe, and now this past week was sort of the final resolution, the final approval of that. So in between those two phases, they had done these various steps. And so now, in essence, in terms of the total tax break on, and I will just be specific about what is actually being allotted here, and that is a sales tax benefit of up to $450,000.
Okay.
So the total project is about $9.9 million. So they have the ability to save up to $450,000 on the purchase of new equipment, furniture, and fixtures.
Right.
So the sales tax for those line items, they can get a savings of up to $450,000 on it. So that was what was approved.
Right.
Other times in IDA projects, as you sort of alluded to earlier, there are savings on the actual property taxes themselves.
Right.
But in this particular case, the only benefit that was secured and approved was
that sales tax.
Oh, okay. Yeah, on the purchase of equipment.
That makes me feel much better, Victor.
We got to take our time, go through things. We'll eventually, get to a better understanding of the whole situation.
Yeah. Well, it's. We get hammered. Mm-hmm. And it seems to be every time. And so when you see these things, I would just love to be a fly on the wall when the first check gets written and when the last deposit is made, and just to see where the money flows. When you're talking that much money, it's wild. And for sure, it is a lot of money, but while this is a separate renovation, obviously, for the interior specific to bringing the Islanders back for those 3 seasons, mm-hmm. The previous renovation that you had mentioned before, was upwards of $160 million, I believe. I might be having that wrong. I didn't write that correct, but I know it was over $100 million. Yeah, and it effectively made the statement, the stadium NHL unready. Right? It cost us $160 million to take it out of.
Well, I'm definitely not a sports guy, so I don't know the specifics or the ins and outs of what does make it NHL ready or not. Yeah. But, this is relative to the larger renovation project that was embarked on before and completed last spring, I believe. This particular project is, significantly smaller in terms of price.
Oh, yeah.
And the other thing, too, is it's very time sensitive, actually, because, and this was a point that was made at the IDA meeting, that essentially the first season game, December 1st, these improvements have to be made by then.
Right.
So they have to be done by then, and they will be playing one preseason game on September 16th. For the preseason game, it's not necessary to have all those improvements done. So, but by December 1st, the proposed fixes and updates, those have to be ready to roll.
Yeah. See, one of the things that gets me is I'm trying to imagine what the people who did the first renovation, what was their long-term goal for when the project was completed. I don't know what that was, because now we're going in to undo what they did to make this. You know what I'm saying?
I'm not quite sure. First off, I want to. We've had a lot of smart folks who've been writing about the Coliseum for ages now. And I don't want to speak specifically to that previous project. I'd love to maybe come back and talk to you about the specifics of that in the past. Yeah. Or I'm sure you could find folks who are more locked in on that situation. But in terms of this project, I'm not quite sure if it is undoing anything, or my understanding is it's just making further updates that are necessary to potentially, have the Islanders come back. And,
right. Well, because the NFL says the stadium isn't acceptable at this moment.
Yeah, it's not up to the particular standards, and I don't know if it's all the standards, but I know specifically the broadcast cable is definitely one of those line items.
Yeah, but capacity is the other. And if they hadn't done some of the things that they did in the first that we paid for, we wouldn't be paying to undo them now. is what it appears to be to me. I could be wrong. I'm just saying that they did this big renovation. Now we got to do more because it's unacceptable now. It was good before. I get the communication stuff, but that stuff that technology can change in a week. So even after they get done installing all of this stuff, somebody could come down the pike and say, "Oh, we got a whole new system that's much better than what you have." And the NHL could say, "We have to have that system." Okay, so the communications thing, I get. That's very kind. But your seating capacity is your seating capacity, and that's not. Technology isn't going to change that. And that did change in the first, construction that they did. And now they're going to, of course, like you said, there's no line item that shows it. But I'll bet the seating capacity is listed in with something else that's listed as a line item. Because that was pointed out as one of the things that the NHL did not accept with the new construction done. Yeah.
And also keep in mind, as it stands right now, the idea ultimately is that this is going to be sort of a temporary stop to a permanent, more permanent outcome. I think that's probably the biggest thing is that this is going to be over 3 seasons. That there will be playing half and half, half in Barclays, half here.
Right.
And then the idea, of course, is that they would settle in permanently out in Belmont when that's complete. So,
right.
We'll see. There's, ultimately, I can't predict the future. I can't say what's going to happen tomorrow, but we can say for the time being that this is the plan and this is the action that the IDA has taken, and we'll I'm sure we'll follow up, and I'm sure we'll have future stories regarding the development.
I'm sure you will. I'm sure you will, Victor. Oh boy. Well, listen, I want to thank you for joining us and coming on the merry ride that is this week's Long Island News.
I really appreciate it. Appreciate it.
Always fun to talk to you. And,
all right. Well, thanks again.
Oh, and thank you. And I'm sure we'll talk to you soon about this very subject, I'm sure.
All right.
All right. Take care, Victor.
Have a great weekend.
You too. Enjoy.
Take care.
Thanks. Well, we want to thank Victor Ocasio for coming on and speaking to us about the story with the Coliseum upgrade plan. And we want to thank Newsday for, of course, letting the reporters call here and talk to us about some of the stories.